commercial landlords' softened stance on renting to cannabis businesses. Anybody who's been in the industry for any period of time has had to deal with the problems of obtaining real estate, either through lease or purchase. And what this is basically talking about is leasing or renting real estate in the cannabis space. Back in California is considered a mature market now, but back in the day when we first started the legal business, if you could find a place that would lease to you or rent to you as a cannabis business, it was down some dusty old back road, and you got what was called triple net, over $2 a square foot triple net leases. They were killers. Well, since COVID and decline in tenancies and real estate, there's a whole lot of money due now for loans on these properties, and a lot of them are sitting empty. So this story is about how the real estate market is now looking differently at the cannabis space because federal prohibitions are not being enforced. So the concern about federal forfeiture coming in is just not there. The states have backed off quite a bit from asset forfeiture, and basically now, if you lease to somebody, you have to know that they're doing something illegal before your property is in jeopardy of being forfeited. And a lot of the lending institutions have backed away from their prohibitions about having cannabis businesses in their properties that they have a mortgage on. All this comes together to make available better places, more C-suites, if you will, in zones where they allow manufacturing, cultivation, or retail spaces. You have to be, around the corner and up a couple flights of stairs to have a retail space anymore. Now, this becomes critical if you're looking into opening a cannabis business, because now you can go out and peruse the real estate market and have a better chance of finding landlords that will lease to you under more favorable terms. Given the vagaries of this industry, I try to put into my contracts a bailout provision so that if you don't get your license in the first year or two, you can cancel a lease and walk away from it without having to incur a 5-year liability or even more. And you don't have to endure all these triple net problems where you have to pay taxes and upkeep and insurance and things like that. I still see that these landlords want insurance guarantees that if something happens, their building's not going to be lost. And there's still struggles with financing of these businesses, and due diligence for MSOs is easier because you can, especially if they're a publicly traded MSO, you can look up their history and their provenance and see how many assets they have under management, what their cash flow is, what their EBITDA is. There's a lot of things you can determine publicly now. But for smaller operators becomes a bigger problem because who's going to finance you? Where's the money coming from? And these people who own real estate, they want some assurances that they're not going to be dumped and left with a bad building. But overall, what this story's about is some good news, and that the real estate market is opening up, and they think with a change to Schedule 3, it's going to be better. I'm not part of that crowd. I think Schedule 3 is going to be a disaster for the industry. Mm-hmm. But there's people with a lot of hope out there that, this will make it different. I don't think so. It will lock a lot of people out. But the real estate business is looking upon Schedule 3 more favorably because you'll have now a legal substance in their mind, even though they don't understand the industry, and that most of us would never qualify to be involved in a Schedule 3 manufacturing, distribution, or sale business. Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw this back at you for your experience and comments about the real estate market and what you all think.
Cannabis businesses are really at the beholdenness of the landlords. It's really, cannabis industry is really a real estate game more than it is even about selling weed, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I always felt like the real estate investments were the only ones that were really paying off, right? For a while, those REITs were so hot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they still think it is. They say cannabis, and their eyes do the Scrooge McDuck thing, right? And then we're paying triple industry standard rent. And it's, I'm literally after this show, I'm going to go back and look for more real estate because I'm trying to find a home for 4 freaking dispensaries right now. And trying to find something that fits within the buffers and trying to find something that somebody doesn't have like a Bank of America loan on because we sure can't go there. So, I mean, there's just so many different hurdles, and I don't know that it is getting any better. I hope that it will. But I don't see that happening right now. And that's, we kind of fall into the same thing that we do with predatory lenders is we're falling into predatory landlords, right? The last thing that you ever want as a cannabis operator is to have your landlord be your business partner. And people are like, oh, well, cool. You can rent with us. We'll come in with you. We want to invest in this property. We'll give you X number of months off or whatever. And you give us a percentage. Well, Jason, you can speak to how bad it is to have a landlord as a business partner. Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of people can. Like the person who is your partner should not be able to lock you out of your house.
100%.
That's what happens when your wife gets mad.
You're so right about that. And, just to speak on that, Steve Lessingham threw in the chat, it says, some landlords are greedy and some are just trying to pay their bills like everybody else. But I think in cannabis, a majority of them are greedy because they're very opportunistic and they're like, oh my God, I see this big money grab that I can get. And they all feel as though that everyone in cannabis is wealthy, rich and making just money hand over fist when reality, the people that are making that money is the government with all their overinflated taxes.
No, 100%. And also a lot of these landlords have been burned now too, right? Because if they're not getting their money, they're like, you know what? Finally, we'll let a dispensary move in. We'll let a cultivation move in. And then they don't pay the rent. They're like, oh, well, now I want 6 months up front. I want a year up front. I want triple deposit. I want all this. And they're just making it so far out of reach for these properties to make sense. And that prize pig you're selling is really not that great, right? It's a gift horse if you're talking about it. So we're looking at buildings that require a lot of tenant improvement. We're looking at properties that just aren't the greatest. So I think we'll see what happens. Yeah, a lot of the spaces, as far as the zoning that happens with cannabis real estate, is generally in a lot of undesirable neighborhoods and areas of town where a lot of the properties are very much dilapidated. Not even that. Like we were looking at a property and there was one thrown to us, and I'm like, Mr. Realtor, that is very, very active. In fact, it's so active that's run by not 1 but 3 neighborhoods. Thank you. We don't want to be the tip of the iceberg for all that bullshit, because it's dangerous, and that means that's going to increase your security costs. That's going to mean that we probably have armed guards 24/7 and still get robbed. You got to really open up and be realistic about where we can and cannot go. But that also falls back on the regulators in some of these buffer zones. Very, very true. Very true.
Well, when a local jurisdiction decides they're going to go green, they designate zones. And as soon as they designate a zone, you have to go out there and try to find anyone that'll rent to you in that zone. That's where they get you by the short hairs, because you have to go to them. And I have seen real estate deals be better over the last couple of years, but they still don't take into account that people have a business plan, and you have to budget for the reality of sitting on a lease for maybe years and not making any cash flow. And the tenant improvements, you sometimes can get credit for them. Very often you have to leave them behind. And if a landlord allows you to go in and do TIs in their building, and then you walk away from it, then they may have to go in and gut it and start over again. And so there's just a lot of uncertainty in the industry still. And this story seems to be a little more optimistic than I am, because when I sit down with my clients, it really brings tears to clients' eyes to realistically set down a budget and have a 6-month, a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year plan, and have funding for that, knowing the vagaries of the real estate market, change in regulations. It's still just a mess. And real estate has been greedy, as you know, both of you, that anybody who's been involved in this knows the real estate is going to take what they can. And if they charge too much, these businesses fail. So you have to have some leverage with a landlord to understand that, you can, try to get all this stuff from somebody, but you're going to guarantee they fail on you. How do you find a sweet spot in affordability for these startup companies with a business? You don't have to go in and bring electricity in, repair the roof, and do all this other stuff. It just kills a business. Real estate is still a big problem for our industry.
Fair enough. Any thoughts on this, Rachelle or Stone?
We're moving.
All right, we're going to keep this moving. We are going to roll right into our next commercial, and we're going to be right back.